You're listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina wa Nabina wa Habibina Muhammad. Khatm al-Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Imam al-Muttaqeen. Al-Hadi ila siratin mustaqim. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa atba'ihi ila yawm al-din. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا وهدينا وخيرنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, in our Rawha sessions we're continuing to look at the final part of Imam Ghazali's counsel to a dear student, which is translated into English as Letter to a Disciple, but whose literal title is Ayyuhal Walad, my dear child. And this is advice on how one is meant to live knowledge as guidance, how one is meant to be transformed by religious knowledge through acting upon it with sincerity, steadfastness, and uprightness. And in recent sessions, he has explained to us what is spirituality. To be upright with Allah and with Allah's creation, and to uphold good character. And he explained uprightness and good character. And having explained the path of guidance, he says in what we're looking at today, أيها الولد, my dear child, بعد اليوم لا تسألني ما أشكل عليك إلا بلسان الجنان. That after today, don't ask me anything that you are unclear about except with the tongue of your state. Why? That I've told you everything that you need to know now. So if beyond this you feel any need, then let your neediness be your question. Right? Let your neediness be your question and be patient. قال تعالى ولو أنهم صبروا حتى تخرج إليهم لكان خيرا لهم. Allah Most High says, addressing the Prophet ﷺ with respect to those who were asking too much. Had they only been patient until you came out to them, it would have been better for them. From Surah Al-Hujurat. And then Imam Ghazali continues, وَاقْبَلْ نَصِيحَةَ الْخَضِرِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ, and accept the counsel given by Al-Khadir alayhi salam, the one Sayyidina Musa went to. حين قال, when he said, فَلَا تَسْأَلْنِي عَنْ شَيْءٍ حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. Do not ask me about anything until I initiate for you mention of it. وَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلْ حَتَّى تَبْلُغَ أَوَانَهُ يُكْشَفْ لَكَ وَتَرَهُ. وَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلْ, and don't hasten things until you reach the right time when they'll become clear to you. That meaning, this is overstatement for effect. He's not saying that if you're in crisis, don't ask me for guidance, but I've made the path of guidance so clear, you have no need to ask. If at any time you feel unclear, remain patient, because what I have given you is enough. And some answers simply take time for them to become clear. And this applies both to the spiritual path, it also applies to the path of knowledge. And that's where consulting, for example, is consulting and then listening to what you've consulted about is critical. I've been thinking a lot about when I got to Damascus, because we just completed 20 years since Omar and I first went to Damascus. And initially, when I started a class with Shaykh Hassan al-Hindi, who ultimately became one of my most influential teachers, for the first couple of months, he was canceling every other class, and in class he seemed totally disinterested. It would take a long time to get to his house because the bus route ended at, there's a Maidan Mansour. To take a bus from Maidan all the way, Maidan al-Sheikh, from Maidan to where Sheikh al-Akbar was, and then you have to walk up the hill. And it was a good 15, 20-minute walk. And you get to his house, they say the Sheikh's tired today. Or you start the class, and after 10 minutes, you say, okay, that's enough for today. We're like in the middle of a sentence. So I was thinking, maybe I have to just find another teacher. But went, asked Sheikh Ashraf Munib, said, he's testing you. You have to be patient. I said, how long? He said, be patient, and if you're serious, eventually you'll be asking him if you could stop, because he'll be giving so much time. Alhamdulillah, the same thing continued, but once, what you're supposed to be doing is made clear, then the responsibility of the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of guidance, is sabr, is patience, right? Which is a thabat, is to remain firm on what is right, on what leads to what is sought. And then he also, and he takes iqtibas from the Quran. Sa'urikum ayati, I shall show you my signs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ, so do not be hasty. From Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 37. So Imam Ghazali says, فَلَا تَسْأَلْنِي قَبْلَ الْوَقْتِ, so don't ask me before the right time. وَتَيَقَّنْ أَنَّكَ لَا تَصِلُ إِلَّا بِالسَّيْرِ, and be certain that you will not reach without spiritual journeying. Right? That I can just show you the way. If you don't strive, you won't reach. لقوله تعالى أولم يسيروا في الأرض فينظروا, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do they not travel the earth and then behold? Right? Behold, the context of this from Surah Al-Rum, verse 9, the context being what happened to those before, but you can't see until you get there. That's a context in which Imam Al-Ghazali is quoting. Right? So that's why it's called the spiritual path, because it is, the path is defined. It has a goal, which is Allah, the closeness, love, good pleasure, beholding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has principles that enable you to adhere the path, practices that enable you to travel the path. The guide clarifies the things that you require, helps you have the discipline. But if you have everything there, but you don't strive, nothing's going to happen. So he says, أيها الولد بالله انتسر ترى العجائب في كل منزل. He says, by Allah, my dear child, by Allah, if you travel, you will behold marvels at every stage. Right? Because للوسائل حكم الغايات means take the rulings of ends. So anything that you do, genuinely seeking the closeness, love, and beholding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every means of those is rewarded in accordance with what your goal was. Right? And what is spiritual travel? It is to truly direct yourself to Allah, outwardly and inwardly, as completely as you can. So if you travel, if you genuinely turn to Allah completely and strive, you'll behold marvels at every stage. Because how are you rewarded for every step on the path in accordance with your intention. Actions are by their intentions. So if you understand that, وَابْذُلْ رُوحَكَ, said, give your very soul. Right? Give your very soul. This is the most precious reality. Right? Seeking Allah. There's nothing else that has any meaning besides this. So give your very soul. فَإِنَّ رَأْسَ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ بَذْلُ الرُّوحِ, because the pinnacle of this matter is to give one's soul. فَالْفَتَى مَنْ أَخَذَتْهُ جُمْلَةً لَلَّذِي تَأْخُذُهُ شَيْئًا فَشَيْءٍ. The truly devoted one, the fata, the honorable youth, the truly committed, is the one whom the beloved takes immediately, not the one whom it takes step by step. Okay? This is, of course, referring to, you can't say, well, you know what, let me consider love, and I'll gradually fall in love. No. True love is not something that is gradual. True love is giving yourself completely. And truly turning to Allah is not just say, okay, yeah, a little bit. That's not truly turning to Allah. Right? It's considering truly turning to Allah, but it's not what it's about. كما قال ذُنُّونَ الْمَصْرِي, as Dhunnun al-Misri said, رحمه الله تعالى, لأحد من تلامذته, to one of his students, إن قدرت على بذل الروح فتعال. If you can give your very soul, then come. Right? Then be part of the spiritual path. وإلا فلا تشتغل بترهات الصوفية. Otherwise, don't busy yourself with the absurdities of those of the spiritual path. Right? Because the basis of spirituality, the basis of closeness to Allah is to distance yourself from yourself. And the only way you can distance yourself from yourself is by striving. Right? But as long as you're attached to yourself, to your desires, your whims, worldliness, then by definition, you are not traveling to Allah. Right? As Ibn Ata'illah says, كيف يشرق قلب صور الأكوان منطبعة في مرآته. How can a heart be illumined with the light of living faith, of beholding Allah, when the forms of creation are deeply imprinted in the mirror of their heart? What are they turned to? They turn to worldly concerns. Then how can your heart be full of consciousness of Allah? أم كيف يرحل إلى الله وهو مكبل بشهواته. Or how can one travel to Allah when you are shackled by your lusts, by your desires? أم كيف يطمع أن يدخل حضرة الله وهو لم يتطهر من جنابة غفلاته. Or how can you even hope to enter the presence of those of consciousness of Allah if one has not purified oneself of the filth of one's heedlessness of Allah? Right? So, and all of this requires striving, leaving worldliness and all it contains, leaving your vain desires, leaving heedlessness. All of this requires effort, dedication, and turning. You're not going to do that, then don't waste your time with the foibles of the people of the spiritual path. Why? What are the foibles of the people of the spiritual path? They'll say, oh, well, those guys wear, everyone dresses in a normal way, but these guys put on a shawl, they they walk around with prayer beads, so the people, just if you think about it rationally, you spend $200 on a fancy sibha, and you spend premium on getting a certain type of premium clothing, and you do this, and you do this, and you travel overseas to the middle of nowhere. but you're stuck exactly where you are. So it's all foolishness, because you could have saved some money for when you'll retire. Right? It was all, and hopefully maybe in all this stuff, at some point you might get a, like a wake-up call, but you're still asleep, right? You sang a few songs, but didn't do anything. So, of course, it's overstatement. Like what Dhunnun al-Masri said, it's overstatement, because there is a secondary benefit to the spiritual path. Right? The true purpose of a spiritual path is that this is a way of change, of changing from where you are to where Allah has called you to be, to become of those pleasing to Allah, those beloved to Allah, those close to Allah, those beholding Allah. Right? But there's a broader benefit of the spiritual path, which is it's a good Muslim club. That's not the purpose of the path. But you're just hanging out with the good folk. Right? But doesn't necessarily need all that to do that. Right? So one has to decide. Right? One has to decide. And then in closing, Imam Ghazali gives 8 counsels. He says, أيها الولد إني أنصحك بثمانية أشياء. My dear child, I advise you with 8 things. اقبلها مني. Accept them from me. لئلا يكون علمك خصمك يوم القيامة. Lest your knowledge be your opponent, your adversary on the day of resurrection. تعمل منها 4 وتدع منها 4. You will act upon 4 of the counsels, and 4 matters leave. أما اللواتي تدع, as for those that you should leave, فأحدها the first thing. So 8 counsels, and this is for someone committed to the way of knowledge. He was a student of knowledge, right? Someone serious about their religion. The first thing he said, أحدها ألا تناظر أحدا في مسألة ما استطعت. That you not debate anyone on any issue whatsoever as much as possible for you. لأن فيها آفات كثيرة. Because in debate are numerous harms. فإثمها أكبر من نفعها. So its sin is greater than its benefit. Its harm is far greater than its benefit. Such as, إذ هي منبع كل خلق ذميم. Because it is the fount of all blameworthy traits of character. كالرياء, such as showing off. والحسد, and envy. والكبر, and pride. والحقد, and malice towards others. والعداوة, and enmity. والمباهاة, and boastfulness. وغيرها, and other blameworthy traits. So don't debate. And this Imam al-Ghazali was someone who had out-argued, he had established the case of Islam over other religions. He had refuted all the major deviant sects of his time, had debated in philosophy, in theology, in law, across the board. He's known as Hujjatul Islam, the proof of Islam, proof established through his prowess in debate. But he says, نعم لو وقع مسألة بينك وبين شخص أو قوم وكانت إرادتك فيها أن تظهر الحق ولا يضيع جاز البحث. He says, yes, if there's an issue that arises between you and some other person or some people, and your intention in it is to manifest the truth, and that truth not be lost, right? Then it is permitted for you to discuss the issue. Right? لكن لتلك الإرادة علامتان. But that intention of discussing the issue has two signs. إحداهما ألا تفرق بين أن ينكشف الحق على لسانك أو على لسان غيرك. The first is that you would not care whether the truth became uncovered at your hands, on your tongue, or on the tongue of someone else. Because the concern is the truth, whoever says it. الثانية, and the second, أن يكون البحث في الخلاء, that the discussion be in private. يكون البحث في الخلاء أحب إليك من أن يكون في الملأ. That to discuss privately would be preferred to you over discussing publicly. So it's not about impressing the crowd and so on. Because that saves you from many of the harmful traits. And then he says, وَاسْمَعْ أَنِّي أَذْكُرُ لَكَ هَا هُنَا فَائِدَةً. He said, now listen up. I will mention to you something here of benefit. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ السُّؤَالَ عن المشكلات عرض مرض القلب إلى الطبيب. And know well that asking about unclear matters is like presenting the sicknesses of the heart to the doctor. وَالْجَوَابُ لَهُ سَعْيٌ لِإِصْلَاحِ مَرَضِهِ. And the answer to a complex question is a striving to rectify, is to heal the sickness. Right? So when there's a confusing issue, the point isn't that you just have an answer. When there's a confusion, it's like a sickness. And the answer to a confusing issue is not just to say A is B, but rather to understand what is the reality of that just as there's physical ailments, there's intellectual ailments. There's things that there are sicknesses that affect minds and thinking and understanding. And the true person addressing people's problems is like a doctor trying to strive their utmost to heal their sicknesses. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْجَاهِلِينَ الْمَرْضَى قُلُوبُهُم. Right? And know that those who are ignorant, those who are confused, unlearned or confused about a matter, they're like someone who has a sick heart. وَالْعُلَمَاء الْأَطِبَّاء. And the scholars are doctors. Their duty is to heal, not just to give an answer. وَالْعِلْمُ النَّاقِص لَا يُحْسِنُ الْمُعَالَجَةِ. And deficient knowledge is not sufficient for giving treatment to the ailing. وَالْعَالِمُ الْكَامِلْ لَا يُعَالِجُ كُلَّ مَرَضٍ. And a true scholar, a perfected scholar, an accomplished scholar, does not treat every sickness. بَلْ يُعَالِجْ مَنْ يَرْجُ فِيهِ قَبُولَ الْمُعَالَجَةِ. Rather, they heal those that they are hopeful will accept the treatment. وَالصَّلَاحِ. And who will accept what it takes to reach a state of well-being. فإذا كانت العلة مزمنة أو عقيما لا تقبل العلاج فحذاقة الطبيب فيه أن يقول هذا لا يقبل العلاج. And if the ailment is, if the sickness is incurable, or the person is in a state where they're aqim, they will no longer get better, then an expert doctor will know that at this point, this situation does not accept treatment. فلا تشغل فيه بمداواته. Then don't busy yourself with treating it. At some point, certain things are not resolvable, so you move on. لأن فيه تضيع العمر, because in that is squandering your life. The Prophet ﷺ was told, إنك لا تهدي من أحببت. You do not guide those whom you love. وما, and the Prophet's responsibilities was only to convey with clarity. Right? ثم أعلم أن مرض الجهل على 4 أنواع. And know well that the sickness of ignorance is of 4 types. This has to do, of course, one, with other people in advising them, etc. But we also have to look at ourselves in that situation. That if I have a sickness, then I have to be cured, I have to approach the sickness with an acknowledgement that I'm sick and a willingness to accept the treatment. Because otherwise you could say, I am sick, and you go to the doctor, but you don't do anything, but you don't go with a willingness to accept the medicine, then the doctor may not give you the medicine that you want. Because they see that you're not actually, that there is a particular treatment, but if the doctor sees that you're not willing to take the treatment, they won't give it to you. They may just say, well, mashallah, keep coming, etc. Why? Because you're not ready for treatment. They'll just, give you some candy, say, ahlan wa sahlan, how's the family, how are the kids, mashallah, may Allah bless you, they'll make dua. But you went in sick, you came out sick, and a little happy that, yay, I met the Shaykh, and they made dua for my grandchildren or whatever. But nothing's changed, right? And a lot of people, they go in sick, they come out, they go to the doctor sick, they come out sick, or they think that the doctor just seemed happy with them and that's what makes them happy. Or they take pride, my doctor's so great, mashallah, right? Which is even more foolish, right? Because someone who didn't think their doctor was all great, then maybe at least they have an excuse. I went to the doctor, wasn't really convinced about them, they didn't really ask. But you say, my doctor is really great, then why didn't you present your sickness? Which is why Imam al-Darqawi, Mawlay al-Arabi al-Darqawi said, the sunnah with going to one's spiritual guide or a person that is one seeking mentorship with is not to present one's good qualities, but rather what is the worst quality you have, what is the greatest sin that you're stuck in, what is the greatest obligation that you're not fulfilling, what is the biggest obstacle between you and Allah, and that's what you present. That this is what I'm stuck in. What is the treatment? With the intent of completely leaving it for the sake of Allah. Right? It's not about, because they'll be, if you want them to be nice to you, they'll be nice to you. Ahlan wa sahlan, marhaban, barakallahu feekum. May Allah bless you. You're included in their dua anyways. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Peace be upon us and all Allah's righteous servants. But the peace descends, but it only fills those cups that are empty and uncovered. So know well that the sickness of ignorance is of 4 types. أحدها يقبل العلاج والباقي لا يقبل. One type, there's 4 types of sicknesses related to ignorance. 1 accepts treatments and 4 doesn't. أما الذي لا يقبل, as for those that don't accept treatment, فأحدها من كان سؤاله واعتراضه عن حسد وبغض. The first is the one who asks, the person who has ignorance, and they ask or object out of envy or hatred. فكلما تجيبه بأحسن الجواب وأفصحه وأوضحه فلا يزيد له ذلك إلا بغضا وعداوة وحسدا. So however much you answer them with good answers that are eloquent and clear, it will not increase them except in enmity, in anger and enmity and envy. فالطريق ألا تشتغل بجوابه. So the right approach is that you don't busy yourself with answering them. فقد قيل, for it has been said, كل العداوة قد ترجى إزالتها إلا عداوة من عاداك عن حسدي. So a poet said, all enmity one could hope for it to cease, except of the enmity of one who opposes you out of envy. And فينبغي أن تعرض عنه. So Imam Ghazali says, such a person, the right thing to do is to turn away from them. وتتركه مع مرضه, and to leave them in their sickness, because you can't help them right now, you just make things worse. قال الله تعالى, Allah Most High says, فأعرض عمن تولى عن ذكرنا. So turn away from the one who has turned away from our remembrance. وَلَمْ يُرِدْ إِلَّا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا, and who seeks only this worldly life. This from Surah An-Najm, verse 29. وَالْحَسُودُ بِكُلِّ مَا يَقُولُ وَيَفْعَلُ يُوقِدُ النَّارَ فِي زَرْعِ عِلْمِهِ. And this is something that it doesn't just relate to someone who's dealing with you enviously, but this is something you have to be very careful about, because envy is not just conscious, but envy is one of those subtle qualities that you can be unconsciously envious, and that you act. What drives certain responses is envy, even though you're not aware that what's driving it is envy. And this is very dangerous. And the envious person, with everything that they say and do, is lighting a fire that burns away the harvest of their knowledge. وَالْحَسَدُ يَأْكُلُ الْحَسَنَاتِ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ النَّارُ الْحَطَبِ. And envy eats away good deeds as fire eats away firewood. So don't busy yourself with such people. Right? Don't respond to them. Don't keep away. And of course, also don't be a person who objects to others out of envy, and beware lest you be envious, particularly of the righteous servants of Allah. There's no guarantee that the righteous, the learned, will be perfect. It's a given that they will have their blemishes, but beware of what causes you to have ill opinion or enmity towards them, because this is ruinous. والثاني أن تكون علته من الحماقة. Another type of ignorance. So one ignorance was out of enmity and envy. Another, Imam Ghazali says, is someone whose cause, the illah, the cause of their enmity, is that they're foolish. They're ahmaq. وهو أيضا لا يقبل العلاج. And that too does not accept treatment, at least not immediate. قال عيسى عليه السلام إني ما عجزت عن إحياء الموتى وقد عجزت عن معالجة الأحمق. It is said that Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, said, I was not incapable of bringing life to the dead, but I was incapable of healing fools. Right? What can you do about it? وَذَلِكَ, and what is meant by the ahmaq here, the foolish person? وَذَلِكَ رَجُلٌ يَشْتَغِلُ بِطَلَبِ الْعِلْمِ زَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. And that is a person who, and this happens a lot in our times, نسأل الله العافية. This is a person who spends a small amount of time seeking knowledge. وَيَتَعَلَّمُ شَيْئًا قَلِيلًا. And they learn just a little bit. من علوم العقل والشرع, of the rational sciences or the legal sciences. فيسأل ويعترض من حماقته على العالم الكبير. And then they question and object out of their foolishness to the great scholars. Right? They say, oh, the scholars are defending this arcane practice of, like the issue, of this and that, and it's something in the Quran. It's something in the Quran. So you're not really objecting to that scholar, you're objecting to the Lord of the worlds. It's a very dangerous place to be. Or you think the little that you know is the absolute. You see a fatwa of some senior scholar and say, well, that's not what the books say. Well, what have you read? Pretty much nothing. Right? الذي أمضى عمره في العلوم, like of a senior scholar who spend their whole lives in religious learning, العقلي والشرعي, both rational and religious. وهذا الأحمق لا يعلم ويظن أن ما أشكل عليه هو أيضا مشكل للعالم الكبير. And this ignorant person doesn't know, but they think that the things that are confusing, that are unclear to them, should also be unclear to the learned scholar. فإذا لم يعلم هذا القدر يكون سؤاله من الحماقة. And if they don't know that much, they don't know that they don't know, or that there's knowledge beyond the little that they know, then their questioning will be out of ignorance. Nobody said that you can do that. So that the little frame that they've put on their knowledge, you can't even answer that. So right response there is to smile, say Allah bless you, and to move on. Right? Because how can someone answer that? So for example, there are fatwas that are dependent on custom and place. Okay? So to give one practical example, in Hanafi fiqh, Ibn Abidin mentions in his Hashiyah, which is the great reference in the Hanafi school, that as for what some of the ignorant do and some of the corrupt do in our times, of kissing their hands after shaking hands with people, it must be prohibitively disliked and sinful. Because what they do, they shake hands, and it became a social norm in some places. Now this is something that is done in many Arab countries. People shake hands and they kiss their hand. Just sometimes it's just an expression of affection. For someone to go, look, that Shaykh, he says he's Hanafi, he's going against the Hanafi school. Hold on. Why? Because it says it in Ibn Abdin. So, but why did Ibn Abdin say, no, but it said it's wrong? Whereas the reason Ibn Abdin is saying it, because in his social context, this practice was only done by people who were distinctively corrupt. And Islamically, we are meant to differentiate ourselves from the distinguishing practices of other faiths and the distinguishing practices of the corrupt. Okay? Or you see, there's a sheikh wearing a suit and tie, and say, how can a sheikh wear a suit and tie? That's imitating the kuffar. And you say, no, it's not. Say, no, it is, because the sheikh this book says imitating the kuffar makes. Hold on, but what is imitating the kuffar? No, but this is imitation. And imitation of non-Muslims is either in the things that are distinguishing symbols of their religious tradition. So, to dress up like a priest with their collar, whatever, to put on a cross, something like that. Or the practices that if done, you would think you're a corrupt person. Okay? Someone questioned Abu Yusuf, the student of Abu Hanifa, how come he's wearing these fancy shoes that were from the lands of the Bulgarians? And Abu Yusuf was the Qadi. He said, do they not eat and drink? Meaning that if we're supposed to be different from the non-Muslims in everything, they eat and drink. So try not eating and drinking. It's absurd, right? So, but such a person you can't argue with, because they think that the little that they know is completely true. So then Imam Ghazali said, so if someone is arguing about through envy, don't. Just leave them alone. If someone is just learned a little and they think that's all there is to knowledge, then at least immediately you can't deal with them. You sort of have to find a way to broaden their vistas, and that may take time. The third case, أن يكون مسترشدا. The third type of person is seeking guidance. وكل ما لا يفهم من كلام الأكابر يحمل على قصور فهمه. But, so you think, oh, they're genuinely seeking guidance. But whatever they don't understand of the words of the learned, they interpret it in accordance with their weak understanding. وكان سؤاله للاستفادة. And their question was to benefit. So you might, if you're short-sighted, someone comes genuinely asking. But what's going to happen? Even if you answer them, they'll interpret it according to their. So that's why he's saying, don't be hasty in answering people's questions. Because they may be asking enviously, with enmity. Or they may be asking foolishly. Or they may be asking with a little bit of knowledge and they'll fight you over it. There's another category of people, the third, they're genuine in asking. But they won't, whatever they don't understand, they'll misinterpret based on their understandings. This happens all the time. وَكَانَ سُؤَالُهُ لِلْإِسْتِفَادَةِ لَكِنْ لِكَوْنِهِ بَلِيدًا. So their question was out of seeking benefit, but because they're not smart, لَا يُدْرِكُ الْحَقَائِقِ. They don't understand the realities of things. فَلَا يَنْبَغِي الْإِشْتِغَالِ بِجَوَابِهِ أَيْضًا. Such a person you shouldn't answer either. Meaning, don't answer their question. And sometimes the thing is, if someone comes and they don't know anything about Islamic beliefs, and they ask, can you explain the reality of destiny and human will? And human choice? So if you could start explaining it to them, but first you have to understand who they are and why they're asking. And how much do they know? Why? Because the person may not even know why they believe, they don't know anything about Allah. So whatever you're answering, they'll misinterpret because they don't even know. So such a person, you don't answer what they're asking about. Right? You need to know who they are and give them what they need. That's what Imam Ghazali is saying. Understand what other people need and give them that. So the answer is not in accordance with the question. The answer is in accordance with the need of the questioner and what they will benefit from. And sometimes they won't benefit from an answer. And then he says, كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نحن معاشر الأنبياء أمرنا أن نكلم الناس على قدر عقولهم. That the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم is reported to have said, we, the company of prophets, have been commanded to address people to the extent of their understanding, which requires consider where people are at before you answer them. And then we'll close with mentioning the kind of person who has a sickness but who would benefit from treatment. Right? وَأَمَّا الْمَرَضُ الَّذِي يَقْبَلُ الْعِلَاجِ. As for the sickness meaning of ignorance that accepts treatment, فَهُوَ أَنْ يَكُونَ مُسْتَرْشِدًا. It's someone who is seeking guidance. عَاقِلًا. And a person of understanding. فَهِمًا. Right? A person of intellect who will understand. لا يكون مغلوب الحسد والغضب وحب الشهوة. And they're not overcome by envy or anger or love of some desires. Someone comes and says, for example, in some Muslim lands there's sectarianism, and someone asks a question, but given where they're coming from, from their sectarian thing, they're not going to listen, because they ask, what do you say about Sheikh so and so? They're fine, but that that they won't listen. So they're not such a person. They're not overcome by envy or anger or love of their own desires, والجاه والمال, or status or wealth. ويكون طالب الطريق المستقيم. And there's someone seeking the straight path. ولم يكن سؤاله اعتراضه عن حسد وتعنت وامتحان. And they're asking or their objection was not out of envy or stubbornness or just testing. وهذا يقبل العلاج. This is the kind of person who accepts treatment. Right? فيجوز أن تشتغل بجواب سؤاله. So it's permitted for you to answer their question. بل يجب عليك إجابته. Rather, it is necessary for you, if you're able to answer their question. And this, of course, would apply to most internet discussions. That's why it's a bid'ah to argue about religion. Right? You know, you post something, suddenly all these people start getting into an argument. Our people don't answer unless someone is genuinely seeking the truth. And they'll understand it. And they'll be willing to accept it. Right? Then it's worth having a discussion. You explain whatever, there'll be a benefit. But if there won't be a benefit, then don't get into it. So personally, my thing is, if my wall, like if I post something, you're welcome to discuss, but you want to argue, that's why there's a delete button. Okay? There's the delete button. In social conversations, people want to argue, moon sighting. Okay, can anyone in the room set what the policy will be for the community? No. Then why are we talking about it? No. Does anyone actually know what the issues are? No. Then why are we talking about it? If we discuss it and you happen to know the answer, will the other party accept the answer? No. Because they have said, no, nothing but calculation makes any sense whatsoever. Everything else is backwards. If that's where they're coming from, is there any point discussing the issue? No. Then why waste your time in there, spoil the relationships? One of the things in that thing, it's called Jawabu Hakim, the wise answer, is to change the topic. Or at least they say to plant the seed of understanding in them. Okay? So, oh, there's a really good article about this. I'll email it to you. And when they calm down, if they're sincere, they'll read it. Right? So this is the first thing that he says to leave. And this is the one he expands on the most, which is debate and argument. Right? And this is, the Prophet ﷺ said, no people went astray after Allah guided them, except when they became given to disputation. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ said that if anyone, whoever leaves argument, when they were able to argue, when it was right for them to make an argument, Allah will fill their heart instead of that with light. Okay? Because it's a sign of sincerity. It won't be of any benefit. It's just ego or whimsically, yeah, let's say something. No. And even just sort of say, well, we're just talking, but it's disrespect of deen. Because if you sit back and look at what's going on, right, we're just sitting here arguing about the religion of Allah. For what end? With no real concern, what is actually true? Right? Manifesting poor character, enmity to one another, insults, etc. All of which have nothing to do with the guidance of Allah and His Messenger. So, if one can, Imam Ghazali's advice is, if you can, never argue with anybody. Never debate. Unless the one asking is genuinely seeking an answer. They're not coming with preconceived notions. They'll understand the topic. Then it'd be worth discussing. But even then, these kinds of discussions are best done privately. Take the discussion offline rather than discuss it publicly. Because when you're discussing publicly, ego gets involved. Right? So, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He busy us with benefit, and then He grant us wisdom in how we call people to truth. And one of the ways to do that is by only speaking of religion when you're sure what you're saying is true, and it's said in a manner that is truly likely to be accepted by the person whom you're saying it to. Otherwise, don't speak. The Prophet ﷺ was masterfully clinical in the way he conveyed guidance. And there's some people who took time. And the Prophet ﷺ never, ever argued with anyone about religion. Ever. You can read all you want about the Meccan period. And these were his own family members. He never argued with them. Even he'd go from door to door calling the Meccans to Islam, and his own uncle would be walking behind him saying, don't listen to this madman. Keep your door shut. Like he was like, you know. And the Prophet never argued with Abu Lahab about what he was going on about. Right? And that's the way of our beloved Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why they were impressed by him. Even his enemies, they're so amazed that there's multiple hadiths that, because they're so impressed with how he responded to them, they want to know, what's this man all about? So several times, Abu Jahl, for example, who was like the worst of the enemies of Islam, at night when the Prophet would be praying in front of the Kaaba, he would go behind the drapings of the Kaaba to sort of observe the amazing worship of the Prophet. And one night, he was hidden behind the draping of the Kaaba from one side, and he was sort of creeping towards the Prophet slowly. And from the other side, another of the leaders of, who was it? Do you know offhand? The name says, another of the main enemies of the Prophet, one of the leaders of, he was doing the same thing. They're trying to listen to what he was reciting, see through the drapings what he was up to, because they're so impressed. And they bumped into each other, and they're like, I was looking for something here, right? And that's how, that's how people, when they're not willing to listen, will do so. Right? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for facilitation, and we heed these counsels. And on Wednesday we'll continue by looking at other things that he gives a warning about. Preachers don't lecture or preach. And he'll explain why. Okay? Because as one of the ulama says, the talk on religion follows the laws of supply and demand. The greater the supply there is, the less demand there will be for it. Okay? And there's great harms in being a preacher or a public speaker, right? That the ulama have always warned. So this issue of celebrity, this and that, there's great harms in it, and that's not how religion works. But also we have to be careful, and we'll look at this on Wednesday. We have to be careful not to not to make our Islam a consumer experience, but also that, fast food Islam, you just go to a lecture once in a while, or a conference once in a while, or a YouTube clip once in a while, that there are many inherent harms in that kind of presentation of the religion. So we'll see. And the biggest problem is that there is an inherent challenge to sincerity in the whole production. As Roald Dahl said, when some men of religion came to his high school, when they left, he said, I couldn't help but think that if these are God's salesmen on earth, there must be something seriously wrong with the whole business. نسأل الله العافية ونعوذ بالله من علم بلا عمل وقول بلا تحقيق. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Shall we pray Maghrib and then we'll have it.
Thank you for listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani. Help Seekers Hub give light to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.